Today on the CEO Barbecue, a bit of an unusual story because we're going to be looking for gold and copper as well as oil in Cambodia together with Angkor Resources. For a bullet point summary of this and all other CEO interviews, please go to resourcetalks.com and subscribe to our free weekly newsletter. The company you're about to hear from has not paid us for the production of this interview, but this interview is still intended only for experienced speculators because this is venture capital and mining is a very risky industry where failure is the norm. All conversations are general and impersonal in nature, and they contain forward-looking statements. I'm not a licensed financial advisor, and my business sells content-producing services, which also makes me biased. So before continuing on, please talk to an independent investment advisor with a good long-term track record because your capital is at risk, and also visit setterplus.ca where you'll find the company's official filings. If you're not 100% sure you understand all the biases and the disclaimers that I just showed you, please go to the last section of this video and do not consume this content unless you fully understand and agree with everything said herein. That all said, Angkor is basically two stories in one balance sheet, if you will, the reason behind which I'm hoping is going to become clearer later on in this conversation. Now, on the metal side, as I mentioned earlier, gold and copper, Angkor's flagship projects with an S, because there are two of them. They're in Cambodia, with the main project being a copper-gold moly porphyry target with multiple prospects on it and grades as high as 0.5% copper equivalent in early stage drilling from 2025. Both projects are in the exploration stage, but early work here shows that they might be worth following up on, although drilling in one of them was suspended last summer due to safety challenges at the Thailand border, which I'll be asking about later on as well. And also, of course, when, how much, I guess more importantly, when is drilling going to start again, or is planned here, is hopefully something I can ask about later on as well. On the energy side, the flagship project is, it's also in Cambodia, and it's a large onshore petroleum concession, which we'll also touch upon later on. And although I'm way out of my depth on oil, and basically everything else, to be fair, this is currently seen as the primary catalyst for the company. So we will talk about it, but they're trying to test whether commercial oil extraction is possible here. And although more exploration drilling is needed, it is worth pointing out that this JV, of which, by the way, Angkor owns 20%, they hold the only onshore license in Cambodia. How can they balance the two very different businesses, and is the plan to keep them together or spin them out, is something I can hopefully ask Delane later on as well. Now, for some numbers and maybe a bit of the boring details, Angkor is listed as ANK, so that's ANK on the TSXV, where the average 3-month volume is about 65,000 shares. The stock's 52-week high is 38.5 cents, and its 52-week low is 9 cents. With a market cap of a little under $67 million and just under 203 million shares outstanding, today this is a 33-cent stock, with a 50 and the 200-day moving average at respectively 29 and 23 cents, which means the stock is now trading above both of them. Moving on to the share structure, insiders are noted as holding almost half the company, so over 45% specifically, but how much of that was actually bought and paid for is also something I'll be asking about later on. On top of the 202.7 million shares outstanding, the October financials show 9.2 million warrants with a weighted average exercise price of 25 cents, with the highest of those being exercised about 30 cents, all of which are thus in the money right now. And then there's also 17.6 million options with a weighted average exercise price of 14 cents, also all of which are in the money as of now. In total, that could result in an increase of about 13.2% in shares outstanding if all those dilutive securities get exercised. And that would then result in about a 12% ownership dilution if, and that's always, of course, a big if, but if all dilutive securities get exercised. And of course, none of this accounts for potential dilution down the road, which is not unlikely given that this is a pre-revenue company that relies on public markets to fund its activities and operates in what is a very capital-intensive industry. Talking about money, the last financial statement is dated October 31st, and it shows me only about $765,000 in current assets, 215 of which was cash and CE, and about $500,000, so 481,000 to be specific, in restricted cash. In terms of liabilities, the current liabilities sat at about $1.7 million, $500,000 of which was accounts payable, another $500,000 due to the JV partner, and 761,000 is the current portion of the long-term debt. So yes, there is long-term debt here in total close to $5 million, 3.9 million of which is outstanding at 10% interest and requiring monthly payments of rounded up to $65,000, and it matures in 2034. There's some money due to some of the insiders, also at 10%, and there's also a new private party loan, also at 10%. There's several smaller private lender loans at 10 to 12% that were wiped out via shares for debt agreement, according to those last financial statements. Is that cash friction something that could get serious later on, and how will they cover the rest of this debt is something I'll be asking later on as well. But for this to actually become a conversation and no longer a monologue, I'll have to shut up already. And Delane, I'll give you the word here. But first of all, thank you for sitting down with me today.
Oh, it's a real pleasure, Antonio. Thank you very much.
The pleasure is mine. And I am looking forward to going over the basics and better understanding kind of the two-tiered story, if you will. But since this is your first time on the barbecue, I will have to ask, how do you like your steak?
Well, good old Alberta beef. We can take it anywhere from rare right up to medium rare.
That's as far as you're going to go, and that's the thing that I respect. And also being in junior mining, appreciating a little bit of blood on your plate is kind of the name in the game, I suppose. And Alberta beef, interesting, actually, that you bring that up. I was in Canada this year, and there's always kind of this. I was in BC, which is I suppose a little sensitive for you guys as well. But anyways, they said Alberta beef is just as good as California beef, and I think that would have insulted you.
You know what? We need to be grateful that we live in a country that we can eat basically what we like and from where we like. So I take no offense to if I choose to eat beef from another country, then it's a choice I make.
Well, that's well said. And jokes aside, we will do a deeper dive in some of the details here later on. But let's maybe set the stage with maybe some clarity here, because I was just wondering, what is it that you're really building here? You've got, again, an oil concessions on the one hand. You've got a gold and copper target on the other. You got JV assets. You're just in the process of selling an asset in Canada. So what's really the end goal for you? Is it prospect generator across commodities? Is it oil focused? What kind of company do you want to be?
Ultimately, we find that our goal is, of course, to build value for our shareholders. That's always priority number one. And being big shareholders and having put our own money where our mouth is, we have a very strong vested interest to get that across the line. Currently, yes, you're right. We have sold our Canadian production. And we did that because when we did an analysis, we come out with it, reducing debt off the books, removing $4 million worth of debt, and come out with a clean $1 million to us. And it would have taken us several years to get to that because it was a large field that needed some more water injection in it over the coming years. So we said, okay, we can get the $1 million now, and we focus entirely on where we think we can increase value quite quickly, and that's in Cambodia. Certainly the onshore oil, Cambodia imports all of its energy hydrocarbon currently. It spends billions a year doing so. It has never had an onshore well drilled, and we are completely convinced they are standing on their own oil and gas resource. So what do we have? We have decades and decades of experience from across the globe that we can apply to traditional oil and gas and make it cleaner, greener, much lower carbon footprint so that the country comes out of the chute way ahead of other countries that have taken decades to develop their technology and their efficiency. So that's why it's the catalyst that you mentioned. That's why it will be a country changer. It's not just going to change our company, but it will, the amount of employment that it will produce for the country is outstanding. The opportunities for additional side businesses that go with an oil and gas industry, multitude of growth opportunities, and it's long term. So we see it as very sustainable and looking at moving that forward quickly in 2026.
But so would you say you are more of an oil and gas company now, or more of a metals explorer, or what would the split there be in terms of percentages, in terms of focus?
Well, because we're working on what is Cambodia's first copper discovery, commercial copper discovery. Um, I don't want to belittle that. I think I think that's a great accomplishment, and gold is gold. I mean, we don't have to talk about, I mean, what the price has done and what that does for, it's a commodity that is in high demand for a variety of reasons. So I would guess at this time, probably our value, the potential value today is probably 50-50. But if we talk about the potential value, we'll see our metals probably go to a 20 to 30%, and the oil and gas for the country will take on a stronger position. And that's just because, like I said, they import 100% of their hydrocarbon energies right now. So for a country to have its own and for us to be the first discovery of that, there's very significant value in there.
Mhm. And we will talk about how you want to move that forward and what else might happen to the metals assets that you have there. But since this is your first time on the barbecue, we're no longer going to be talking about meat. We'll have to take a step back, maybe go through what I call the smell test first, which intends to understand more about what the incentives and the track record of management are. Starting off with yourself and your track record, who are you, and have you made more money for shareholders than what you've spent during your career so far?
Well, I started out with the company way back at the founding. We went public in October of 2011. I took a position at the time. I had a strong background in social social projects, and we saw Cambodia. It was a choice. My husband and I were both semi-retired, and we wanted to go in and try to make a difference in the extractive sector. So ultimately, I was there for, I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years, then went into finance. I do have a background in my background is actually in horticulture, agriculture, and commerce. And and I've been an entrepreneur most of my life. So I've had other businesses that I built from, and fortunately, and was quite successful at those. So taking this on was, yeah, a first public company, and ultimately we are now, as far as our vested interest, like you said, we have roughly just over 202 million shares. My husband and I own 54 million of those. If I add the directors, we would collectively hold 60 million. When I add 4 or 5 other friends and family, we would own about 102 million of the shares. So it is closely held. It is people that know what we're doing, how we're doing it, and they also know our track record. And I think, I mean, look, there were lots of them, especially local up in northern Alberta, that said, look, we're investing in you. We get the project, but get this across the line. So ups and downs and a whole variety of things. We did a pivot to include oil and gas when I took over as CEO 2.5 years ago. And that was simply, again, that was part of the entrepreneurship coming through. I said, we need to change. We need to pivot what we're doing to match the market. The market wants faster returns. The market wants more protection. They want to be mitigated. And we're in a foreign jurisdiction like Cambodia. So it made good sense for me. And I wanted, honestly, I wanted revenue streams. I wanted to get to cash quicker. And with oil and gas, it is much, much easier to get to cash flow than it is for minerals. Minerals take a long time, and exploration licenses, and then we go to feasibility, and then we apply for exploitation licenses. And it's a really long window.
Yeah.
Oil and gas, especially with the production sharing contract that we have in Cambodia and our production that we did have in Canada. You drill, and now we can drill a significant well in a couple of weeks.
Mm.
You complete it, you test it, you practice it. You're cash flowing in a couple of months. So that's a big plus when you're talking about large capital investments and getting things moving.
Mm.
Ultimately, we did take on 2 years of cash flowing in Canada. And but like I said, we sold that for the reasons I indicated earlier. But I think That's who I am. We are very, very committed to getting these projects across the line. And will we get the copper to a mining point? No, but I expect that we will put a partner in place that has more astute skills in the production side as we continue drilling it out.
Mhm.
When are we drilling it out? We have, we did stop. We did stop in July because there was a conflict at the border between Thailand and Cambodia.
Yeah.
And we were only about 50 kilometers from that border. And it was the prudent thing to do to say, look, safety first, let's make sure that our people are safe. We were nearing starting that up again, and then recently that border conflict flared up again. So we have a ceasefire now. I would expect towards the end of Q1 of 2026, I would hope to be back drilling there.
Mm. That's good that you're touching upon these things here, Elaine, because I do want to ask about them, and I will later on. Just going back to yourself and your background, is this the only thing that you're doing right now? Do you currently hold any other executive or board positions with other companies?
I do not. No.
Good. Yeah. And I also want to talk about that skin in the game. Again, management insiders are 50% of that. Large chunk of that is you. How did you get those shares? And what do you think is the average cost that you've paid for them?
Um, we got those shares from pulling it out of my bank account and putting it in Anchor's bank account. Ultimately, we were probably, as compensation, we were probably given about 5%. I would say between 5 and 10% of those shares.
Hmm.
The rest of them, it was hard cash that we invested. And again, it's part of what I look for in a company is managing. Are they putting their own money in? That really matters to me because then I can look anybody in the mirror or anybody in the face and say, look, I'm spending your dollar exactly the same way I would spend my dollar.
Hmm.
So yeah, they weren't given to us or awarded to us. We said this is worthwhile doing. As far as average cost, um, we'll go back and I would guess it's about high 20s. 29. I mean, we bought shares at 64 cents. Um, but we've also had a number of shares that we've been accumulating over the last few years. And looking at my record, you'll see both my husband and myself, we continue to buy.
Hmm.
You know, month after month, year after year, you'll see us, we're still active in the market. In due course, I think we'll start putting some of that back into the market. But for now, we continue to watch really carefully and and buy when it's astute to do so.
Again, any idea on that average cost, or is that too hard to get to given that you've been buying over time?
I think, like I said, I'd have to go back and combine the portfolios, but I'm guessing it's at about 25 cents.
Okay. Okay. Well, really what I'm looking for here is not necessarily a specific price, but more like, is there cheap paper? Is there like a penny stock or anything else within or outside of what management owns here? What about at the forming of the company? Like maybe when it was a shell or something, that anybody get any free or cheap paper?
Back at the beginning, this October 2011, it was an RTO that we formed, and if I recall correctly, there were shares at 17 cents then. That
Okay.
was so that was the lowest it went. Honestly, the lower points were just within operations of the company, and for about, gee, we're at an 8-year kind of high range right now, so we stuck around that 7, 8, 9 cents for 5, 6 years. That was, in my opinion, kind of dismal, but it
Yeah.
is what it is.
Well, when you own half the company or close to half the company, I can see how that is. Funny to think about 2011 being 15 years ago now and not five. Kind of in my head, 2011 is still 5 years ago, and I think that's where it's going to stay. I know, but it's talking insiders. Do you or any of the other insiders personally own a royalty on any of the projects you have?
No, we do not.
Good. That's the right answer. Short and sweet. And I think that's about it for the smell test. I want to move on and talk specifically about the business strategy. And maybe we're going to work our way into talking about that. But take an even bigger step back. What are the key elements of the business strategy that you have? And maybe we're going to work our way into talking about that. But take an even bigger step back. What are the key elements of the business strategy that you have? and talk about how that even happened in 2011 and how you found your way into Cambodia, which is not like it. I mean, it's an interesting jurisdiction in the first place, and really where I'm going with this. So just so you know, in the context of what you could talk to me about is if the assets are as good as you believe they are, why hasn't someone developed them yet? So yeah, take me back and walk me through it.
Sure. So October 2011, we had attended some presentations, private company that was looking at gold in Cambodia. And like I said earlier, my husband, who is a power engineer on the oil and gas side and had been for years and had done lots of overseas projects, building plants and port facilities, et cetera, et cetera. And my background had been in business. We owned a variety of private companies, and so when we went to this and we heard the story, and there was an opportunity to. I had also done a lot of social development projects with some NGO organizations, and I said, let's do a little bit of research here. And my first concern was gold in Cambodia. Man, there's some horrible stories about gold and taking advantage of people. And honestly, I remember going back and Googling gold and black gold and all the horror stories that went with it. We then talked to our who became our VP of exploration at the time and said, look, I have some concerns about it. He said, there's every way in the world to do this right. It's about the choices you make. Okay, so that set a platform, and then we went into it saying we expected it to be a kind of probably a 5 to 10 year project, and that it would take time, um, and we moved into that. And I remember asking my husband at the time, "You want to look at oil and gas?" And he said, "Oh, I've been doing that all my life." So we got into it, and once an original board of the private company found out that he had experience with international companies and negotiating national agreements, they asked him to go take a look. He did that. He came back and said, okay, we have a choice to make, Delane. We can go forward with this project, and it's going to mean we're going to start over because the permits are not secure and whatnot. So there was a whole bunch of cleanup to be done. We chose to go forward with it. And I said, I'd love to do the social side of it, the community development, the social, the environmental. So we entered into it, picked up 5 new licenses. There was everything from gold. There wasn't copper at the time. There was none discovered in the country. And some other additional. Anyway, we filed that down over the years to the 2 that we hold now, because again, we believe those are the 2 that bring the best value for shareholders. And so there were some management changes and whatnot as well. So here we are. And at the time, about 2012, 2013, the government asked us, they said, look, we understand you've got an oil and gas background. Would you look at that in the country? And we kind of hummed and hawed and went, I've been there, done that. But we started looking at the licensing, and then it evolved. And so by the time 2019 came along, we had done a lot of research. And we said, you know what, this country's got oil and gas. Nobody's discovered it. And you had a question earlier. You said, well, why hasn't it been discovered? You know what?
Yeah.
Why haven't other people done it? If you know your history on Cambodia, so they have, and a lot of it is it goes right back to the 60s, where they were so close to Vietnam and that Ho Chi Minh Trail, and so there was a lot of warfare there. They finally came out of that, and then they had their own civil war with the Khmer Rouge. So by the time that finished, it was 1995. Cambodia used to be like the pearl of Asia. It's got a wealth of natural resources, but of course warfare drilled it down, and it also, with that, reduced the population considerably, but more importantly, reduced the professionals. So the Khmer Rouge, they literally annihilated all the professionals, the lawyers, the architects, the doctors. It was devastating. So Cambodia spent the last 25 years rebuilding, and it's an amazing accomplishment in the amount of time that they've had. So they've got great infrastructure now. And but anyway, back to our role, and as we kind of went through it, put our own geophysicists and geologists in place to take a look at the various projects. Copper and gold, just we were told there was no copper porphyry, no porphyry systems at all in Cambodia. We've proven them wrong. We found two commercial gold discoveries. One was very, very near the Vietnamese border, and we sold it because we knew we would never be able to develop it. Another one we sold to an Indian company, and they have battled with the government for 15 years over permitting and getting that mine into production. And to this date, it is still struggling. So we then went on to, and when we found copper, and we have two porphyry systems that we are looking at now, it was taking a little bit stronger position in the market. So in other words, finally, we were starting to appreciate globally, we need copper. And as much as big copper mines look horrendous at times, we can do it better. We can move to a whole variety of procedures to make sure that that's a better proposition for all the stakeholders.
Yeah.
So here we are. We're into just pre-COVID. We've committed to the oil and gas. We've looked at all the licenses. And then we go into the procedure of negotiating a production sharing contract, which took 2 years. And it sounds like a ridiculous amount of time but this is the first in the country. This is after they've looked at 5 developing nations to formulate this production sharing template. It's very, very comprehensive. But it also covers all the stages. So right through prospecting, exploration, development, production, reclamation. What that does for us is it allows us to accelerate or decelerate, one or the other, so that we can move things forward. The exploration period of the 30 years is 7. What we've done in the last 10 months is we've covered 2 years. And again, because we said, we're not taking 7 years to prove this thing. We're going to do this in 2 years. We're going to get in there. We're going to see if we got something. If we don't, we don't. And if we do, we do. So initially, the seismic, I was expecting our geoscientists to come back and say, okay, we've done this seismic. Now we need to do more 3D seismic. That's not what happened. What happened is the first, it was called South Bokor, the first area that we did the seismic and the first part to be processed came back, and then the geoscientist said, this is a thing of beauty. Look at this. And of course, I'm saying, color. I'm not a scientist, right? I'm a business person. I'm saying, okay, talk to me. What does this really mean? He says, Delane, we have 4-way closure. There's 3 things that are necessary to have oil. You need closure, you need a good structure, and you need a really good reservoir that allows the oil to pass through. He says, it's 48 square kilometers. It has 4-way closure, and it's an anticline. And of course, I'm going, okay, so 80% of the world's oil comes from anticlines. It is very rare to find an anticline that is undeveloped and not producing today. So he said, we've got one and it's big. Okay, what we don't know until we drill what that reservoir is all about. How deep does it go and how many meters of pay zone do we have? Okay, so then we go on to the next one. And Central Bokor, same thing, except it's bigger. Okay, great. North Bokor, same thing. Doesn't have full closure because we haven't done seismic up to the north end. But he said, we're talking, and so then the probabilities come. Now we have another 4th basin called the Muscle Basin. And this is interesting because when our geoscientists are working on it, there are several indications just outside the national boundary of our license that look really compelling. And it's about 200 square kilometers.
Mm.
And so just before we started seismic, we did an application to the Ministry of Mines and Energy and said, look, we'd like to add on these extra that kind of square off this area. And here's why. It's in another area that is not committed to a license, and it would be very prudent if we're going to be doing seismic that we do it through there as well. And honestly, Antonio, within 3 weeks, we had the government change a boundary of a national license and put that in writing to us. So I know permitting is a global issue. I know people will criticize Cambodia at a drop of a hat to say, oh, it's going to take too long to do. And sometimes it's taking too long. This was an example of what the government can do when it chooses to say, all right, we're going to move forward with this. So anyway, we got the 3 Bokor basins, and then we've got the Mussel Basin. So it's a different kind. It's much shallower. It's a different kind of formation. But ultimately, I'm ecstatic with the results of the seismic, because what it's determined for us is we've got 4 solid drill targets. So next step and meanwhile, we have a great mineral team that also continues with the copper, continues with the gold. We did bring in outside partners for that. One was from Vietnam and one was a Canadian partner. However, they failed to meet their commitments. So when they don't put the funds forward to meet the government fees and whatnot on an annual basis, or the renewal fees, we were forced in both cases to take those licenses back. That slowed us down in 2025. When we took the copper license back at Andong Bor, the one in the northwest of Cambodia, it meant we were it needed to be drilled. And we started drilling, but of course then we had a conflict that broke out between Thailand and Cambodia. Mm-hmm. So back to the licenses, as much as they're a little bit slower moving, now that we have them back in our own hands, we would plan to move those forward quite quickly in 2026. Yep. Will we look for an additional outside partner? It makes sense to do so at the right time. So our goal is to go back and do some drilling, make sure that we prove out both the gold and the copper grades, and then we'll look for a partner that hopefully will make their commitments and follow through. Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at. That's what brought us up to today, to say, here's the oil, here's the gold, here's the copper. So 2 mineral licenses and 1 large oil and gas license in the country. Yeah. Again, nothing more in Canada at this time, because we see increasing the value is much easier in Cambodia.
I think that sets the stage nicely, and maybe you can talk to me more about how ownership of assets in Cambodia works in general, or more broadly, because I believe you, like, for example, you transferred one of the licenses there. Funds have been received, but the title transfer still sits with the ministry, if I understand correctly. So talk to me about that in the broader context of how it all works down there, and whether it's different for minerals and metals than it is for energy.
Good question. So when we apply for a mineral license, it will be an exploration license first. Mm-hmm. And you go through a procedure to apply to the Ministry of Mines and Energy for that. If you're granted that license, there are generally the first 3 terms, 3 years, and then 2 2-year renewals. There will be minimum work requirements in each of those 3 phases. If you meet your requirements, then generally you are granted the renewal. If you don't meet the requirements, then the government can terminate the license and you can't go to renewal, Or B, they can penalize you a financial amount that goes back into a performance guarantee, and then you go into the renewal and work through the next steps of the work requirements. After that, after 7 years, you can get more extensions for exploration, but the government would expect that by then you're narrowing the land area down and you're moving towards production, or saying, you know what, there isn't commercial quantity here. So we find that the government at each one of those phases, they want us to relinquish at least 10% of the land area, unless we have good reason not to do so. As far as timing, it really depends. Their procedures have certainly improved over the last 15 years, but I think one should count on about a 6-month application process before you were to be awarded a license. Now, on the oil side, like I said, this is the first in the country, so I can only speak to kind of being the first. The production sharing contract requires Ministry of Mines and Energy and the Ministry of Economic and Finance, and finally is signed off by the Prime Minister. So it's a big deal. And this first one, of course, we were working right through COVID as well, so that made things a little bit more difficult as well. But it did take us 2 years to negotiate and get it signed off. We think it's reasonable. I think there are some improvements that both the government could make and the contractor could make, as far as kind of delineating what one might run into. But again, the first one is probably subject to, okay, how do we do this better and faster in due course? The beauty of it, though, is, like I said, the beauty of it is it's fully permitted. You know, you want to go right through exploration quickly and can prove a resource and take it to production. You know, you make application, or you give notice to the Ministry of Environment for your environmental assessments ahead of time, but that's all specified out, and I think we're able to kind of move it forward so much quicker and with our own efficiencies. Look, the government also takes a role in, we second them to be part of exploration and part of production, and that's in the production sharing contract. These are well-trained, let me qualify, these are well-educated professionals in the Ministry of Mines and Energy. However, lots of them lack practical experience in the field because they've never had this industry in the country. So they want to be part of, like they came out, worked with us on the seismic. They'll come out and work with us on the drilling. You know, when we get to production, they'll be there on production. It's just part and parcel of also building a national expertise for the country.
Do you think they're going to push for more government ownership always, like at every project, essentially?
We don't see that, and it's a great question, and one that we commonly get, saying, why will the government nationalize this? Will they take it away from you? We have not in 15 years seen any indication of the government doing that. Personally, I think it's part of rebuilding this nation. They're not there yet. They're not. We went to them. They had also asked us to take a look at offshore, and we did some work for them for a couple of years, trying to give them some insight on the offshore. And we said, you understand, you could be a part of this. You could have a nationally owned entity. And 2 or 3 different times, no, they're not interested. They're not there yet because they want the revenue. They don't want the expenditures. They want the asset. They don't want the liabilities. And doing it the way they're doing it, they get that. And they also have time to build a national workforce. So Institute of Technology of Cambodia turns out great geoscientists. We've hired them on the mineral side for, over 10 years. They're really stellar, and it gets better and better every year. And now there's actually going to be some oil and gas in the country. So their geophysicists and their hydrocarbon specialists can also come through and know that there is actual employment in their faculty.
Mhm.
So,
So not even as much as a royalty or any kind of
oh
something
yeah,
else. Yeah.
oh, the government gets a royalty. They get a healthy royalty off of production, and they also have a participating interest at the point of production, um, if they choose. That's the way it's written in the PSC. Um, it's it's under 10%, and they pay their part of costs out of the production proceeds. So again, it makes sense because of the situation that they're in. I think, Antonia, if we were, like I said, 40 or 50 years into this industry, or um, even 20 or more, and you've got a lot of people locally that have the skill set for it, it might be a different story.
Mm.
And of course, it always changes with government changes too. It just depends on which way are they shifting. But for now, we feel very, very secure that, I mean, here's the question. Fine, they take it from us. Who's going to do it? Who's going to do it in the country?
Mm.
They don't have an industry, so they don't have any expertise. They don't have any equipment. They don't have any infrastructure. They don't, which then one would say, well, why are we doing it if they don't have that in place? Because the upside and the impact that it has on that country is tremendous. It's over the top. How do we know that? We went back to Statistics Canada and pulled the details of what happened in Alberta. In the time we had no oil, there's a little wee bit in Turner Valley, and then we struck oil in 1947.
Mm.
Here's a bottom line here, right? So here's a province of probably 2 million people back then. And and 50s, 60s, 70s, right? They're building this industry in Alberta because we've hit oil, and it changed the GDP from up to 2006 by $40 billion.
Yeah.
Now that's, again, back in 50s, 60s, 70s, $1 million was a lot of money. So when you start talking billions, okay, by 2002, 174 billion from from the from the oil and gas industry.
Mm.
And so that affected the entire country. It wasn't just Alberta, but that spread across the country. Now imagine that. And that's what's going to happen in Cambodia. We are convinced this is not small potatoes. These are, like I said, these are big areas. So when we hit, whether it's gas is actually more valuable than crude, but it's going to open up all sorts of opportunities. Who's going to build the tanks? Who's going to build the containment? Who's going to do the rubber matting? Who's going to do the trucking to the port? Who's going to put in a topping plant so that we can convert the crude to diesel fuel and sell it domestically? I mean, there's so many opportunities that come with this particular industry, and it's going to literally mushroom the employment opportunities in Cambodia. It
Mm.
now has 16 million people. It's and a growing population. They're a young population. They want futures. They want jobs. They they are reasonably well trained at each level, and then when you get to post-secondary, they become very well trained. So yeah, I think it's going to make a huge impact in the country. Um, and and ultimately, it's the government. The government says it's not in a position yet to be nationalizing that.
Mm.
So we think we're safe, and we think there's an upside.
To the note of ownership, I did see that you've flagged a related party entanglement risk with the JV partner in Block 8. What exactly is the conflict of interest there, and how is that managed?
I am a non-controlling shareholder of the company that is initially funding this. Now they went on. I mean, honestly, I looked for funders, and of course, everybody says, it's too green. No way. Oil companies wouldn't touch it. Funders wouldn't touch it. And a company called 358 which I am a shareholder of, has been doing oil and gas development in Canada for several years.
Mm-hmm.
And I mentioned it to them. I said, I think we're going to have to walk away because I don't think we can't find a funder. We got the expertise, but. And the principal of that company came back and said, well, maybe we could swing it. He too has significant shareholdings in Angkor, and said, I'd have to lay it out. And so um, we've disclosed that, and I let him make all the calls on that. And what we have is currently a 2080. So he said, I'll handle 100% of the funding, and we get a carried interest in Angkor. What we're working on now is, because this drilling is going to be a $50 million kick here to undertake the drilling portion. It all comes out of his percentage. And I said, yes, but we're working with you. So we will increase from 20% to 30%, and then have the opportunity to buy back in as things proceed. So there's some wording in our agreement to do that. But I find it works really, really well. Now, it's unheard of to get a 20% carried interest in the oil industry. It's like, I've never heard of it before. So I thought it was a very, very generous. And then I pushed the envelope a little bit and said, Angkor's doing a lot of work on this. We would like to gain more of an interest. And so there's lots of flexibility there. And we move forward. This third party that would actually do the drilling of these wells, they'll have a minority interest for providing that 50 million. And so between us, close to Angkor, we will maintain well over 50%, 60, 70% interest, so that we can reap the benefits and also make sure that it's handled in a manner that brings real value to our shareholders.
I do want to maybe go back to the Cambodian element here, because you mentioned something there that made me think about social licenses and how that works. Do you go directly to the local population, or does that get handled through the government? And what's the current situation for you on, again, both the I know you touched upon it, but maybe you can talk to me about it more, but both the metals and as well as the energy side.
Yeah, we're really proud of what we've done. We started at the local level. Mm-hmm. Listening to what the communities have to say and explaining what we would like to do, we thought was just step number one. So first you listen and you explain what we want to do, and then we discuss how we can work together. And it shouldn't be this profound. I was really honored to speak at the UN several years, about how do we take developing countries and move extractive sectors. And Antonio, I expect to be treated in a manner if some foreigner comes knocking on my door. And I said to our team, and everybody's on the same page here, let's make sure we treat others in the same manner that we would like to be treated. So if I were to come to your community and I want to work there, boy, I better be prepared to sit down with you and say, this is who I am, this is what we'd like to do. We'd like to know any concerns that you might have, and what are your needs. And it's worked really, really well. And we're proud of it. And we've managed, even during COVID, to sign Cambodia's first national agreement with the indigenous communities to work all the way from prospecting, exploration, development on the mineral projects. 45% of the indigenous communities of Cambodia are in Ratanakiri province. That is our head office for the minerals. And it's up in the northeast quadrant, right next to Vietnam. So we're dealing with them all the time. So therefore, it just makes sense to make sure that we're on really good terms with them. Now, we transfer that same kind of attitude in the southwest corner on the oil and gas and on the northwest at our Andong Bor copper project. Treat these people the same way that we want to be treated. To me, it's just a basic, you know, we're very, what you see is what you get with us. Now, my husband, he's a bit of an anomaly, but our staff said, and we hire Khmer staff to do this. We come along and kind of, we will certainly speak when we need to, but it's so important to involve the locals. And of course, there's translation issues too, right? So we might go from English to Khmer, we get that translated, and then from Khmer to the indigenous, to the tribal language. And so it can be a bit of a process, but it's entirely worthwhile. Anyway, my husband, the staff came to him and said, Mike, because we ride around on bicycles. He liked, bicycles, and they got motos and big old Lexus, SUVs, because that's a sign of importance. But this is a little bit of us being Canadian. No, we're fine. We can be really subtle here. And so we have both in Phnom Penh and in Ban Long, up in Ratanakiri, we have a couple bicycles there, and we can go just about anywhere we need to go. Now, of course, if we're going out to the prospect, we've got some older four-wheel drive trucks that we take and whatnot, but over time, we've said we're no better, no worse than any other citizen we meet. We need to make sure that we're setting an example of what a really effective, ethical, socially minded, successful project brings. So anyway, that's part of the, and I don't mean to get on that soapbox, but it is part and parcel of our entire philosophy. It doesn't matter what we're doing. It doesn't matter. And I say this with great pride. The first question that we get asked if we go into a village is, will you teach our children English? The perception is that Cambodia is, it's so corrupt. It's, they just want money. No, they don't. No, they don't. And we find the minute if mom and dad have employment, the first thing they do is send their kids to school. They don't put them in the fields to work. They send them to school. So they're no different than we are. We want a future for our youth. We want to build a better nation. We want to have a cleaner, greener environment wherever we are living. And we can do that. So that philosophy of, and look, I've had some people say, oh yeah, that's kiss your sister stuff. It's like, well, it's part and parcel. Does it cost us a lot of cash? No, because it's mostly about an attitude. It really is. And I find it to be a win-win. And it's also the way I get great satisfaction out of that. Because we have left a legacy. We have had, look, the company that bought the rights to the second gold discovery was an Indian company. And they ran into all sorts of issues with the community because they didn't treat them. And we actually had NGOs come back and say, you need to make that company do the same thing that Angkor Resources did. And I said, look, we're responsible for our own behavior. I'm not responsible for anybody else's behavior. We can set an example, and then it's up to the community. If they don't like it, they're the ones that can change it. I can't. I don't have a hold on that. My example gives them an alternative. So I think it's really, really important, especially in developing nations today, to bring the best of what we have
Hmm.
and to walk shoulder to shoulder with them when we're going into projects, when we're going into difficulties, when we're going into celebrations, and give them the credit that's due to them.
Hmm.
We're the
That
foreigner.
that's maybe what I found when I was looking into it, by the way, because I did find some history of local opposition obstructing exploration that was tied to your operations in Cambodia. Is that what you were saying about the predecessor company there, or what exactly happened? How is that being resolved?
Well, like I said, they're dealing with the government now because ultimately it's out of our hands. We discovered the project. We discovered the gold. We discovered the commercial quantity. The Indian company has it, and and yes, they've made some mistakes. People have got hurt. People are unpaid. Um, that leaves a reputation. Um, and often, I mean, it's challenging to make sure that we're not painted with that brush, because of course to local people, oh, it's these foreign miners that are coming in,
Hmm.
and so we've tried really hard to clarify. This is us as a Canadian company. These are our standards. This is our way of, if there are conflicts, of finding a resolution to them. Um, and look, the government has quietly, said to us, "We love your model. It's the most professional one we have in the country." I mean, that was right from the Secretary of State several years ago. He was going to every single mining operation and mineral exploration project and saying, and he said, "Look, this is amazing." It, to me, like I said, it's really just a philosophy that, again, it's what you and I would expect if foreigners were coming, I don't know, on our land, in our community. We want to hear about it. We want to know what's going on, and they deserve the same thing. So, um, is that what you're referring to, Antonio? Is there another?
Well, yeah, I just found that there was local opposition, so it could be that, and I was in general hoping to learn more about the history of local opposition in Cambodia as a whole. But I think you have painted a picture there. When really where I'm going with this is just wondering, could you go back to drilling the porphyry target tomorrow, essentially, if you had the money and desire to do so?
We could. We
Yeah.
could. Yeah. Yeah. With the ceasefire in place, look, when there's missile launchers driving past your site in front of your core boxes, it's time to get out of there.
Hmm.
But like I said, that's been a conflict that's gone on for 100 years. And if you look at the history of that, it's so this was a first in the 15 years that we ever had to say, holy smokes, we got something that we need to be careful here. Local conflict, and I think this should be addressed. If we have artisanal miners that are Khmer, that are Cambodian, and they come on to our prospects and are, panning the streams and whatnot, we don't we don't stop that. We They're making a living. They're not taking anything from us. Um, because we're looking for larger commercial quantities. In fact, they're a really good indication because they don't waste their time.
Hmm.
If they're doing that, there's gold there. If they are from another country, and often we have, well, not often, twice we have had artisanal miners come over from Vietnam because we're that close to the border and they would be on the property. Um, we just we notify the Ministry of Mines and Energy and they come out and they remove them.
Hmm.
Um, one of these, the Andong Mia project has a prospect, a copper gold porphyry on it called Canada Wall. And there was an entire team of they'd come in and supposedly had to grow a rubber tree plantation permit. but they weren't putting rubber trees there. We went in there and they were mining. They had built facilities and they're, and that kind of thing. We just, again, notified the Ministry of Mines and Energy, and they're removed. They know that they're not supposed to be there.
Hmm.
So, but I don't recall where we had difficulty with the locals. I mean, like I said, it's important that we take the steps to make sure that we inform them and talk to them and listen to them and kind of meet their needs um, and again, even this national precedent that we have, this agreement, it's not about. I mean, here's some examples of what they ask for. They're teaching. They've got a young lady she's in high school and she's teaching some literacy in the evenings. There's no power in this community. So they kind of got these little lights on and from flashlights and said, we could use some help with that. Okay, let's put up 6 solar lamps in the community, and one of them will be in the school, what we call a school, and it's really underneath of a home where they can gather. That's the kind of thing they ask for. Can you help us with? Okay, yeah, we'll pay for the $30 for the solar lamp and put it in there. No problem. We're building a road and have an excavator in there. They will say, can you help us improve this road after rainy season because it's got ruts in it? That's the kind of question that we get asked for our participation in helping. Economic development. They've got some land. What would be the best agriculture cash crop product that we could put in here that would give us revenue streams and some sustainability for the community? Do you have any insight on that? That's what I mean by working with them side by side. And then, of course, when we need to hire laborers, that's the first place we go.
Yeah.
We've got 3 months work here. This is what we have. Can you provide us with six people? And this is what they're going to be paid.
Mm.
So
When do you think you're actually going to be going back to drilling the metals assets?
I've been discussing this week with the 2 gold. We will be starting on a trenching project on the CZ gold prospect very shortly, like within a week here. And drilling out the wild boar. Now, wild boar it's about 3 square kilometers, lots of grab surface samples, right up to 70 grams per ton, lots of them around 20 grams per ton there. So I would anticipate we'll be drilling that in the next couple of months and seeing if we can move that forward. And the CZ zone, once we do the trenching and the assays on that, that'll give us some more indication of when we would follow up drilling on that. But it's really nice to do it before July because it's dry season now. And
Yep.
it's just so much easier with everything, access and
You, you,
staffing.
you did have that 15-hole program in June last year. You had to cut it short because of tensions at the border, the Thailand border. What happened there specifically, and do you see yourself revisiting that specific program? I know you've talked to the market about what you saw in those holes since, if I've seen that correctly. But yeah, do you see yourself going back to that specific spot, or where exactly do you want to drill?
Yes, for sure. We intended to do 5 holes. We only got through 1.5, and then the Thailand Cambodia complex
Mm-hmm.
was close by. And this week we confirmed some of the deeper portions of what we call hole 9 have been sent to assay. That's going to take several weeks before we get them back, but that was our VP of exploration has indicated. He said, I want to get those back before we go back to the site and continue drilling because it might change some of the orientation of the subsequent drill holes 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Mm-hmm.
So will we, again, would hope the first quarter of this year. we'll be rolling on that one as well.
Yeah. Do you see yourself doing all that work and funding all that work, or would you want to have a JV partner for that as well?
I think we'll do that work to prove it because we're quite confident of what we're going to find, and then bring in a partner after that. So I believe with what we're doing and what we've got in front of us, we'll have the funding ourselves.
Right. Well, I essentially have a three follow-up question that I typically go into here, or a three-part follow-up question. And that's time, money, and risks. And we can maybe start with the first one, but time, yeah. How much time do you think the strategy could take of you proving up something of merit before you get in a partner and actually start doing the big programs? Is that a one program target that you have here? Or would it take multiple programs?
I think, let's break it down. The Andong Bor Copper Project. I think if we finish this, the drilling of these 5 holes, that would be enough for us to bring in a larger partner. The gold, Andong Mia, we need to do the trenching and the drilling. Both of those, because it's on the same license, it'll be a partner for the license, not for the prospect. So again, I think, yeah, we're talking one project, one small project. That's enough to say, okay, we've got every indication that this can look commercial. And again, those will both happen. Well, let's give ourselves a little bit more time. They're going to happen in the next 6 months. On the oil, I believe we will have in place a funder for this drilling program, again, by the end of Q1 2026.
Yeah. I did
So,
mention that at the beginning too.
yeah.
Well, and then the second thing that I was thinking about is so time and money. Yeah, how much money is that plan going to cost? How much money do you have right now, and when do you think you're going to need more?
So our deal selling the Canadian production gives us $1 million. So we've got a couple $100,000 in the bank right now. We'll get another 700,000 by March 1st. That's to kind of cover general operations, and we can funnel some of that off towards the gold projects. I have had requests from 2 or 3 entities that want to invest. I'm very careful about dilution at this point. Even though we might hold half the stock, I don't want to dilute unless we need to. So putting those funds in would allow us to certainly do those drilling programs on both the copper and the gold. And I would anticipate maybe in the next 60 days, we would see a private placement we'll do it at market. I didn't want to do it back in the 8, 9, 10 cent range. And I was hoping to do it between the 30 and 40 cent range. So I think we're there now. And I think there's a decent opportunity that we would close one of these quite quickly.
Is this an oil and gas financing or junior mining financing? And really what I'm asking here is, are you going to do warrants and then give a bunch of money to a bunch of brokers, or how do you see yourself doing that financing?
Again, two of the requests would have no finder's fee. And if I were forced to, would I do a warrant? Yes. But because they're coming to us saying, we want to invest, and I won't offer it. I'll say, no, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to do it at market. We're going to, it's going to be, we don't have to put it out to a bunch of people, and we'll close it. But I always budget in there that it would be half a warrant per share as well.
Yeah. Okay. Gee, what's the size of the potential financing? How much money do you need?
These people have come into us between 3 and 6 billion each.
Okay. Is that going to be enough for you to finish and go through these goals that you just told me about? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's more than enough. And again, I'm assuming that we bring in a separate partner that's taking a percentage of
Mm.
the oil project. So that 50 million, that's a separate kind of undertaking that's not going to affect our parent company equity.
What is it? Does that include monthly burn, like G&E, and how much do you think that's going to be going forward?
Mhm. Um, the monthly burn on the G&A for the oil side is about 200,000 a month when we're getting into actively on the ground drilling. And now it doesn't count the drilling. The drilling is millions. But we have a corporate G&A that third-party funder would have to cover as well, to say, these are our people, this is what we're doing, this is required for that. Currently, the Canadian burn rate is about between 35 and 40,000 Canadian per month.
Yeah.
The Cambodian burn rate on our mineral side is about, without active on a license exploration going on, it's about 18,000 US per month.
Mm. Yeah. Does it so that's what, 3 million bucks a year, give or take, total, everything together?
Well, no, we wouldn't spend near that on G&A. If it's just G&A and if you want to consolidate them, then I got 40, I got 30, 70, about 800,
Well,
800,000 Canadian.
okay, because I was looking at your financials. The last financial statement was about 225 a month on average over that 3 month period, and that's excluding share-based compensation. But that's including everything. Essentially, what I'm looking for here is everything that's not project related, everything else on top of it. So consulting, management, everything else, marketing, and everything you might have.
Yeah, you'll see on our financial statements, I mean, we've incorporated the costs of the oil in there. That's why I like to separate the oil out, Antonio, because the financials might reflect that, holy smokes, they're spending a couple 100,000 a month on G&A, on salaries and consultants and whatnot, but it's being funded by another party. It's being funded by our JV partner. So it's
Right.
an in and out of the company.
Yeah. But so out of pocket cost for you less than non-project related out of pocket cost for you less than $1 million. Does that sound right?
Yes,
Okay.
just under, yeah.
Yeah. Good. You also have some long-term debt, as I mentioned at the beginning, mostly at 10% interest rate, as far as I understand it. What exactly is it? What's the plan for dealing with it?
Okay, first off, there was 4 million on the Canadian play, which is now gone. That was the Canadian oil production. There is, I want to say 700 or 660,000 that is a loan payable to myself. There's kind of open terms on that. If we have the excess cash, we'll pay it off. Otherwise, we just leave it on the books as an open. And that was probably 5, 6 years over period up to the pivot point when I became CEO and said, okay, we need to change what we're doing here to put some revenue streams in. That's where the majority of it was created, was prior to that date.
Mm.
And we just did one that is a 6-month term for 385,000. We pay 10% on that, and it will be paid out. It can be paid out anytime after a 6-month term. That's the wording on that.
Yeah. Do you see
So
yourself
I
having
think
to rely
that's,
on debt again in the future, or are you thinking mostly equity from here on out?
well, I think we're to the point with our projects that my goal, I really don't like that, is to kind of clear these up and get them off the books. So getting the 4 million off, that was taking about 63,000 a month for oil production, getting that off was that was a big contribution to say, okay, yes, we were making some money on it, but it was not enough to justify, an extra 10 or 20,000 wasn't giving me warm and fuzzies each month to say this is helping with our operations. So moving that out and getting $1 million is more meaningful to me at this point, and I think more beneficial to the company and the shareholders.
Mm.
Secondly, the going forward, I don't. Again, even these people that came to us to say, we'd like to put money in. Well, I don't want to issue another 40 million shares. I don't want to do that. So I can justify part of it. And people have said, when money comes along, just fill your pockets and go. I
Mm.
want to treat every dollar that you put in the same way that my dollar spent. So I think we'll do a little bit of what I call horse trading and saying, well, look, go buy this percentage go buy half of it in the market, and maybe we'll, instead of 5 million, maybe we'll take 2.5 and do a
Mhm.
private placement that way at market.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of things I'm thinking about now. If we don't need the money, I don't want to take it until we get to a point where I think our value is realized.
Mm.
And right now, we're not there. 35 cents Canadian. Um, Look, until we get a drill in the ground, that price should be north of 50.
Yeah.
When we get a drill in the ground, I don't even want to say what it would be, because if we hit, it's changing. Look, the really conservative evaluations came back on the oil and gas, saying net present value at 10% discount, with all the discounts for porosity and and likelihood and recovery factors. On a really conservative end, it's 700 million.
Mm.
If there's a whole bunch of gas, we're into the billions. Those are, to me, that's lovely to have a goal out there. But let's be really, really conservative. If we think that there's actually 200 million barrels in those basins, we're going in, not even the 700 million net present value projection was done on 30 million barrels. So no, keep it really small. This is the first in the country. We got to get, trucks in place. We got to get it to the port. We got to get the facility. There are other things that happen. And yes, we can sell it all at port. Or we can convert, if it's gas, we can put in gas turbines and convert it to electricity and take that on that way. Those are not long-term projects unless you go really, really big, which we're not. So there's a right time to be taking on additional capital. But to answer your original question, I don't think we'll be taking on any more debt. It's very much our approach, and certainly my focus is finally to a point where we're able to get rid of the debt. Let's get ourselves out of debt, and then we can move forward easier. We can have those cash flows in place, or we have project overhead that somebody else is funding.
Do you feel like do you feel like you are in a position to argue those terms? Because those would be good terms, at market, no discount, potentially no warrant, and so on and so forth. But you are still in the exploration stage. So is the company at a stage where you can actually negotiate those terms?
I think that people coming to us are coming because they understand where we've been, down to that 4.5 cents and and again, when I explain to them, okay, here's what we're anticipating is coming. They've been pretty open. Nobody has said go pound sand. Nobody said you're dreaming in Technicolor. Um, I think we are in a unique position, and look, I'm pleasantly pleased that we would receive those calls, but we don't have to take it. Even the $1 million from the sale of the oil in Canada I think, is going to be enough. Now it's going to be much tighter, but to get us through to our drilling. Um, and I think finishing the drilling on the copper, on the gold, and initiating it on the oil, each one of those is going to, again, be a major change for us. So
What do you think is the largest risk in that process? That was the third one in my list here. Yeah, well, what's the biggest risk for the company right now?
I think in a foreign country, there's always geopolitical risk. And um, do I think the Thai and the Cambodia conflict would no, because it's something that's been, like I said, it's been going on for decades and decades over a temple. It's over a it's over a strip of land. Um, so I'm concerned. I don't think that's a huge drawback.
Hmm.
Eyes wide open. If we go in there and we drill the oil and somebody else goes to the government and says, we're going to give you suitcases full of money and but we want that license.
Mhm.
I think we need to always consider that. Do I think it's likely? Absolutely not. Not our reputation and frankly, you can imagine what would happen to foreign investment going into the country if that kind of thing was done. Because we would not go quietly. We would make sure that the other thing is who's going to do the work? Who's going to do the follow up? So I think we're in a pretty good position there, but those are really common questions, and so they need to be addressed. Is the corruption an issue? Well, I've already described that we've made it really clear from day one. We're a publicly traded Canadian company. This is how we do business, and there's just no room for that. Um, so then we talk about, okay, do we have the people in place and to actually execute and get these projects across the line? And right now we had a team of great 9 top professionals, each with over 30 years experience to handle the oil play, the copper and the gold. There are lots and lots of both Cambodian and expat people in place, and we've got a really good team there.
Mhm.
So, is there anything you have in mind as far as risk, Antonia, that you're wondering? Um,
Yeah, I was wondering about the strategy is in large part dependent on you finding a partner, and I was looking at some of the previous deals that you tried to close, the BSN agreement, BIAS and BOR, they were terminated after defaults, as far as I understand it, and then
yeah,
you reverted to full ownership and operating them. Um, so is that a risk? Like, is finding the right partner maybe a risk? Is there enough demand from parties that have balance sheets or share structures large enough to finance a large enough exploration program that you can then find and partner with?
great question, and a really fair question. So, yeah, we've we've become a little bit more selective about the partners that we really want to move forward with, and we're looking for larger partners. However, there's also large companies, Fremont, Rio Tinto, that are looking for large copper plays. We believe we have that. We want to finish some drilling before we put it in front of them. Um, there are also state-owned entities like JOGMEC from Japan and that most likely are also looking for additional mineral and oil plays.
Mhm.
Partners on the mineral side, again, we have some in mind. We want to finish drilling, especially the Andong Bore copper.
Mhm.
As far as removing the partners, look, if your partner doesn't meet the obligations required for you to maintain the license, and they don't do it, there's just there's no other way around it. You just have to say, I'm sorry, you've breached the terms of the agreement, and and you're no longer a part of this. And so I think it's only prudent that we make sure and follow that through.
Another risk or note that I was thinking about is, you're one country focused now after divesting the Canadian assets. And you touched upon it earlier. You said it's an existing risk, not one you're overly worried about, but it is there. Is that something you would be looking to manage? Would you be looking to get any kind of different assets outside of Cambodia?
We've got a lot invested in Cambodia, and we know that country well, and that country knows us well. But I'm an entrepreneur. If the right deal comes along and something and it makes good sense, and again, I go back to this time and again, if it brings our shareholders good value, of course we're going to look at it. Mm-hmm. Do I have any in the pathway right now? No, I do not.
Yeah. Those are essentially the two main things that I've written down is financing. How do you finance it? You said a partner. That's why I followed up on the partner. And then jurisdiction, one jurisdiction focus. A third one maybe, and I kind of wrote it below the third position really, but it is something I've been wondering about is focus. Again, two vastly different businesses, mineral exploration and energy. Any plans to spin that out, or how do you see yourself kind of managing that efficiently enough so that it adds the value that it could add if it was a sum of parts type of thing?
Yes, great question. And look, people have said, how do you do that? How do you do copper, gold, and oil at the same time? I'm a businesswoman. I'm not a geoscientist. I know what I don't know. I will bring people in to fill the voids. And that's what we've done. So we have, here's this oil team and it chugs along, and here's our mineral team and it chugs along. And whether it's copper or gold, they manage those two mineral projects at the same time, no problem at all. So I wouldn't change that. And I don't profess to know things I don't know, but I will find the right people that can bring it. So managing it, I think we've done a good job of that. I think over the last 3 years, we've executed that, plus be it another jurisdiction with production and carbon capture, all managed at the same time. Again, I think it's really important. You put people in place, let them go do their jobs, because I believe our stellar team does an exemplary job. And so my idea of my responsibility between bringing in value means, okay, letting these people and just managing people. It's bringing it together. So I have no qualms about it. And I guess the proof is in the pudding. Mm-hmm. Look, we have found 2 commercial grade gold deposits in Cambodia. We have discovered 2 copper gold porphyry systems that we were told there were no porphyry systems in the country. We have acquired Cambodia's first and only onshore oil and gas license. We have completed 2D seismic over 350 line kilometers. We've done 2 years' work in 10 months. It's not a bad execution record. What have we not done? We haven't created from those long-term cash flows that would be self-supportive. But Antonio, we were really close. Now we're really close to doing that. So yeah, I think we're managing our resource people and our actual assets pretty well and streamlining them so that moving forward shouldn't be an issue. I have no qualms about managing multiple projects. Like I said, we've got the team to do it, and they've already proven that they've done it. So.
Yeah, so my conclusion from listening and talking to you for almost an hour and a half here at this point is that you're just a business lady from Alberta who likes her steak blue rare. Those are my main takeaways here, which I can definitely respect. What is I'm about to wrap it up, Delane. What's the most favorite criticism of Angkor that you've heard so far since you've been CEO?
Taking too long. our original shareholders, they would have come in with us in 2011, 2011, and they stayed with us. They stuck with us. They've been really loyal. But and that's my criticism too. This has taken longer than we thought it would. But we're a tenacious bunch, and we're going to see it through. And like I said, I feel like we're at the 90-yard line of the 100-yard dash, and we're saying, okay, we're getting the copper across this line. We're getting the gold across, and we're going to get this oil across this line.
Mm-hmm.
After that, there's an abundance of opportunities in each one of those paths that put us on a whole different playing field.
Yeah. That's fair. And that's something that I think you've talked about multiple times throughout this conversation. And hopefully it is going to be faster here in the future. That's at least the indication that I got from you. What's your most favorite criticism of me? What do you wish I would have asked for? What am I forgetting to ask you or doing wrong here?
Gee, Antonio, I've never had, wow. I think this is one of the best interviews I've ever had because you've done your homework. You know a lot more about us than most people that are talking to me, from the deals that we made, from past debt to where we're going now. And I really appreciate that. That's not a criticism. So that would be the first thing. What didn't you ask me that I wanted you to ask me? Yeah, I think you've covered him really well.
Mm.
Again, why was the pivot to energy so important? And like I said, it's a personal thing. I mean, I watch this. I go through social development with the company, and then I'm in finance with the company, and then I'm watching this, kind of going, guys, we can't keep going back to the market to get money. You can't do that. That's not a good solution. Gee, that's what governments do. We're not a government. So in order to do that, we need to get these revenue streams in place, and that was the catalyst. And because energy, we have this expertise around us. We know how to do this better. When there's an opportunity to apply that in a whole new jurisdiction, it's really important that we take advantage of that. And it really does kind of boil down to making people, planet, profit a reality. Lead, follower, get out of the way. Let's go do this. And I think that's something that Angkor it differentiates Angkor very much. Our vested interest, our method of operation, our mitigating diversification, that's what makes us different from every other company out there. And when you find that and put it all together, okay, and they're this close, yeah, it's compelling. It's compelling.
And I think what I got from your answer, like why the pivot to energy or why add that on? What I get from you is that it was a kind of a special situation where it just kind of came up because of the jurisdiction that you were in. Like it was not exact that it's more of a bottom up approach than a top down approach. It's not like you took a bet on the market and said, let's go looking for oil. It's more like you saw this project kind of fall in your lap and you're like, we got to do something with it. That's kind of what I got from your story, if I'm getting that correctly.
Yeah. And we had, like I said, we had the team that had that skill set in their back pocket, and they went, okay, we're going to pull it out again. we're going to go do this. And I think, Antonio, having energy, I mean, we can't live without it. It's like copper. We cannot live without this. So everyone, we need to do this really well. And that's how I feel about energy as well. We cannot exist without it. And when people get, and every once in a while there's conversations about, these copper mines look horrendous. And I said, would you like to turn the lights on when you come home? Would you like to, when it's 40 below in the north, you want to keep grandma warm and yourselves warm? We need to be realistic about our world. I am the first to be more than aware of the environment and what we can do to improve things. But that doesn't mean that we don't need to manage our natural resources well. And darn it, we have the expertise to do it well.
Mm.
So therefore, it's important that we walk the talk. Just sit back and criticize others. No, let's go make this a better place to live. And we only do that, and especially copper. Gold is gold. Everybody loves gold, and it's great. But copper's the thing that, just imagine if there was no copper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see.
We wouldn't be talking, for starters.
We would be struggling horribly. There's no conductivity for any kind of energy form that comes to us right now. We just take it for granted.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really, really important. And of course, gold is a commodity that's in high demand, and oil is no different.
Mm.
We need our oil and gas. We need our traditional hydrocarbons until we're in a position where we have renewable resources. But there are factions out there that say we've got 800 years of hydrocarbons sitting in the ground that we know about. Well, they don't know about Cambodia yet, but it's going to add some more to that. Because, like I said, there are very few new jurisdictions coming, but they're still out there. And this is one of them. So Antonio, I've really enjoyed this. I sincerely, this is a very different interview than I've had with other people. And so, gee, thanks for the time here.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. Thank you for your time as well. And I might as well quit while I'm ahead. So I'm going to end it here. But really, thank you so much for the kind words and thank you for doing this.
Okay.
And as always, thanks to everyone for watching Resource Talks. I have a couple of more things to say, though. The fact that this company was interviewed here today does not mean that they are necessarily a good or a bad company. I'm not here to endorse nor attack anyone. I am simply here to ask some questions. If you find that I have failed in asking a question that you would have liked to hear an answer to, which will happen as I'm not an experienced interviewer, please let me know and I will try to correct that mistake in a future interview. As mentioned at the beginning, please understand that mineral exploration and development is an extremely risky business. Losing money is the norm and should be the expectation. This is a very complex sector, and the performance of individual companies typically depends on many different moving particles, including company-specific factors like geology, financing ability, and many others, really, as well as particles that are outside of the company's control, like geopolitics, macroeconomics, commodity prices, and many more, most of which are nearly impossible to fully understand. Moreover, these companies that typically get interviewed on Resource Talks are in the pre-revenue stage, which means they rely on the public markets for the financing of their operations, which could result in shareholder dilution. Furthermore, as a general rule of thumb, you'll be better off understanding that all company communications online, albeit this interview or their website and their presentation and their social media accounts, or even the social media accounts which you thought were your friends and then told you about a stock, everything really that these companies do is intended as marketing. And although I do not make buy or sell recommendations because there is a clear conflict of interest given the nature of my business, many out there do. And you should be aware of that inherent bias and you should be careful out there. That bias is not always going to be clearly disclosed with everyone out there. So it is safer for you anytime you're watching any type of company specific content to approach it with a dose of skepticism and assume that the party telling you about it is biased in at least some shape or form, because there will always be a bias. Again, albeit clear or not. So always ask yourself what the incentive of your counterparty is and never rely on them regardless of their incentives, but instead double check if what they're saying is true, again, by using setterplus.ca. The fact that I have no idea what I'm doing should already be clear to you at this point. I am not saying this to make jokes or laugh with myself. I just simply do not have a long enough track record of consistent investment profits. So I should under no circumstances be considered an authority on anything. Again, although this may sound amusing to you, believe me, it is not amusing and it is not intended as a joke. I'm simply pointing out a fact and warning you not to rely on anything I do or say. Unfortunately, at least to my understanding, nobody out there has any special abilities. The CEOs do not possess any superior knowledge, and they cannot know about what will go up, what will go down, or what will go in circles. Some people even believe that to be rule number one on Wall Street. Nobody really knows. None of us know whether any of the company's activities will result in a success, again, given that we're talking about high-risk activities where most of the times it ends in failure. Oh, so unfortunately, try as I may, I won't always catch all red flags or all challenges with the companies. So even if I did ask a few tough questions in here, don't rely on this being all of the tough questions. Again, these are complicated startups with many moving parts, and I am conflicted given the nature of this business. Therefore, I cannot guarantee the quality of anything presented in this video, and you cannot hold me responsible for any losses or damages stemming from the way you decide to use this interview. Viewers, listeners, and readers acknowledge and agree that the information presented herein did not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security or investment or to participate in any trading strategy. Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business strictly disclaim any and all liability for losses and or damages, whether direct, indirect, special, or consequential, or other consequences, however so caused, arising out of any use or reproduction of the content published by Resource Talks or any decision made or action taken in reliance upon it. By consuming this content, all consumers vow to release Resource Talks and all parties involved in the management of the business from all claims, proceedings, or consequences. This is all to say, I know it's a lot of lawyer talk, but this is all to say that you shouldn't blindly trust me or anybody on the internet, and you should do your own research. Once again, social media is meant for entertainment. It is setterplus.ca where you do your research. That's where you'll find the company's official filings, and I encourage you to read and analyze the Management Information Circular, the financial statements, the Management Discussion and Analysis, and whenever available, the NI 43-101 technical documents. If you don't understand everything in those documents, the chances of you losing money are even higher than they normally are in this space. And as mentioned earlier, the chances of even the best analysts in this sector losing money are extremely high, since this is venture capital and it is not for everybody. I'll leave you with one of Charlie Munger's quotes, which I wish I had listened to more often earlier on, which says, quote, "If you don't understand it, don't do it."